Welcome to the deep dive. You know, with everything going on in Nigeria at the moment, the economy, social issues, well, the 2027 elections are really shaping up to be a major turning point.
Absolutely. And it makes you think hard about the information we're getting, especially on crucial things like, well, national finances.
Exactly. In times like these, clear, accurate information is just vital for you, for everyone, to make sense of things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's precisely why we're here today. We're doing a deep dive into a specific claim, one that's been made by some government officials,
Mm-hmm.
something about Nigeria having fully paid back an IMF loan.
Yeah, that's the claim. And we really want to unpack that, see if it stands up to scrutiny.
So our mission today is to analyze this information about the IMF loan repayment. We'll be looking closely on an article by Dr. Uche Diala, Disinformation on IMF Debt.
That's our main source, yes. And we'll also bring in some reporting from Punch newspaper to help build the picture.
It's just so important for you, the Nigerian electorate, to get a clear view of these financial claims, especially right now. Misleading narratives can really muddy the waters.
Definitely. So let's get into it.
Okay, so what's the specific claim being made about this IMF loan?
Well, the core claim, which Dr. Diala's article focuses on, is that the Nigerian government has completely, fully paid off an IMF loan. That's the message some officials have been promoting.
Fully paid off.
Okay.
But Dr. Diala's article, it pushes back on that, right? What's his counter-argument?
He basically argues that saying it's fully repaid is, well, it's misleading. At best, a huge oversimplification. To understand why, we need to look at the specific loan involved.
Which one was it?
This was the loan taken back in 2020, the COVID-19 Rapid Financing Instrument, the RFI.
Ah, right, the RFI. I remember that. The pandemic caused chaos everywhere, and Nigeria's economy took a big hit. Punch newspaper had details on why Nigeria needed it, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Punch reported that the loan fully disbursed April 30th, 2020, by the way, was meant to tackle urgent balance of payments problems.
Balance of payments. So basically, not enough foreign currency coming in to cover what the country owes internationally.
Exactly. It was needed because oil prices had plummeted, the country was heading into recession, and there were immense pressures on government finances. It was an emergency lifeline, really.
Okay, an emergency measure. Now, the crucial part, the repayment. This seems to be where the stories diverge. What's the actual schedule?
Right. So according to Punch and Dr. Diala's analysis, the repayment of the principal that's the main amount borrowed for this RFI loan, it's actually scheduled to start in 2025.
Start in 2025, not finish.
Start, and it's spread out over time. And what's more, the interest payments on this loan, they continue even longer, until 2029, in fact.
Wow, okay, that's quite different from fully repaid. Can you give us some of the numbers involved?
Yeah.
Just to grasp the scale?
Sure. Let's see. For 2025 alone, Nigeria is set to repay a principal amount of SDR 306.81 million.
SDR, special drawing rights.
Yes, the IMF's unit of account. So SDR 306.81 million principal plus charges and interest of SDR 22.81 million. Add those up.
That makes SDR 329.62 million just for 2025.
Correct. Which translates to roughly 446.21 million US dollars at current rates. That's a significant chunk of foreign exchange needed next year.
Over $440 million just for next year. And what about after 2025? Are there still payments due?
Yes. From 2026 right through to 2029, there are still charges and interest payments. They're estimated at around SDR 26.7 million per year.
Which is about?
Roughly 36.14 million US dollars annually.
So if we tally all that up, the total expected repayment over the next 5 years or so.
The total outstanding comes to about SDR 436.42 million. In US dollar terms, that's approximately $590.78 million.
Nearly $600 million still to be paid over the next 5 years on this loan.
It really does. And Dr. Diala makes a key point about distinguishing principal from interest, doesn't he?
He absolutely does. He emphasizes quite strongly that you can't really claim a loan is fully liquidated or exited when you still owe interest.
Both parts, the original amount and the cost of borrowing it, are fundamental. You haven't finished paying until both are zero.
That distinction seems pretty clear-cut. So it begs the question Dr. Diala raises. If the claim isn't accurate, why make it? What could be the motive behind this, well, alleged disinformation?
That is the million naira question, isn't it? Dr. Diala suggests we need to be wary that this might be a deliberate attempt to shape public perception, perhaps for reasons that aren't immediately obvious.
He also brings in some context by looking at the previous administration's debt management, the 2015 to 2023 period. What's his observation there?
He notes that during that time, there weren't reports of Nigeria defaulting on its debt obligations. That includes debts inherited from even earlier governments.
Yep.
He even gives the example of specific crude oil-backed loans, saying they were paid down consistently as scheduled. And that practice, he notes, has continued under the current administration too.
So a history of meeting obligations, perhaps without making a big public show of each repayment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is where Dr. Diala's analysis gets really striking. He compares the borrowing levels.
Yes, this comparison is quite stark. Dr. Diala calculates that the current administration borrowed N22.11 trillion in just 18 months, between July 2023 and December 2024.
18 months. N22.11 trillion. How does that compare to the previous 8 years?
Well, the previous administration, over its full 8-year term, borrowed a total of N39.91 trillion domestically.
Wait, hang on. So in just a year and a half, the current government has borrowed more than half of what the previous one borrowed in 8 years.
That's what the figures presented by Dr. Diala indicate.
Yes.
A very significant increase in the pace of domestic borrowing.
That is staggering, especially, as you mentioned, given the government's claims about savings from removing subsidies, petrol, electricity, agriculture.
Exactly. It raises serious questions for you, the listener, about fiscal management, about where the money is going, and the long-term sustainability of this debt path.
And Dr. Diala also draws a contrast in terms of what the borrowed money was used for, or at least what was visible.
He does. He points out that many loans under the previous administration were linked to identifiable infrastructure projects, railways, roads, bridges, airport upgrades, things people could actually see.
Tangible projects.
Right. But he expresses concern that for the current, quite massive borrowing, there's less clarity. It's harder to pinpoint specific, large-scale projects being funded by these new debts.
That lack of clear linkage between the borrowing and the outcome is definitely a concern.
Yeah.
It makes it harder for the public, for you, to judge if this debt is being used productively.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Diala suggests there might be an element of, maybe counting on people not digging too deep.
How so?
He raises the concern that the government might be relying on the fact that many Nigerians are busy, maybe don't have the resources or inclination to cross-check every official statement against the data.
Which unfortunately can make it easier for potentially inaccurate narratives to spread.
Precisely. So as we examine all this, the IMF loan claim, the borrowing trends, it really comes down to the accuracy and transparency of the financial story being told to you, the electorate, especially with 2027 on the horizon.
And speaking of 2027, Dr. Diala issues a warning related to the upcoming elections, doesn't he?
Yes, he explicitly warns that Nigerians should expect and be watchful for potentially more narratives like this one. He suggests these tactics might become more frequent as political competition heats up.
It really underlines the need for critical thinking, for checking sources.
Absolutely.
For everyone.
And just to reiterate, our goal here isn't to take sides. We're presenting the analysis and information found in Dr. Diala's article and the Punch reports. We want to lay it out clearly so you can form your own judgment.
Exactly. We're reporting on the content of the sources.
So let's quickly summarize. We've looked at the claim about the IMF loan being fully repaid and contrasted that with the evidence showing ongoing principal and especially interest payments until 2029. We've also highlighted the dramatic increase in the pace of domestic borrowing under the current administration compared to the previous one.
And the questions raised about the transparency and the specific use of these new substantial debts.
And throughout, we've stressed the importance for you, the Nigerian voter, to think critically, to question, and to seek out reliable information about the country's finances.
Which brings us to our final thought for you today. Considering this discrepancy around the IMF loan, the sheer scale of recent borrowing, and the concerns about transparency, what do you think are the potential long-term consequences of these financial narratives versus the underlying reality for Nigeria's future?
It's a crucial question. We encourage you to look for more information, discuss these issues, and really scrutinize the financial claims you encounter.
Because ultimately, an informed, engaged citizenry holds the most power to ensure accountability and steer the country towards a better future.